Well, good afternoon. My name is Martin Tyner, and I'm with the Southwest Wildlife Foundation. And most of you know that we've had a little bit of a contest going on. Name our new wildlife ambassador. Yes, that's a sweet girl. And this is a peregrine falcon, and she has a bit of a story behind her that we need to tell everybody about. This little gal came out of a captive breeding program. She wasn't bred in the wild. And through the captive breeding program, sometimes, just like with humans, sometimes animals, they're not perfect, and they're born with some. I hate the word. I really yes, there's my pretty girl. I hate the word disability. I much prefer difficulty, and so she was born with a difficulty. She's extremely nearsighted. Now, if you can just imagine, a falcon like this, their incredible eyesight, and how they're able to spot, another bird, because that's what they hunt as birds. They could spot another bird, 2 or 3 miles away in the sky. Well, she can't do that. And because she can't do that, she can't be put in the wild. And though she was actually bred in a breeding project for falconry, she can't be used for falconry because falconry, that birds are flown through and allowed to hunt. And so she can't be used for falconry, and she can't be put back in the wild either. And so she has, oh, I know, you're so wiggly today. And so she has a permanent disability that makes it impossible for her to be used for what would her normal life would be. A falcon like this, they love to fly, they love to soar. Oh, pretty, pretty girl. And she will never, ever be able to do that ever again in her entire life. She'll never know what it feels like to be thousands of feet in the sky and dive at 200 miles an hour, because she just doesn't see well enough to be able to accomplish that. Now, the breeder really had a choice, and that is he can't make them available for falconry. Nobody wants one that has poor vision. Really cannot be put into the wild. So the only thing left for her is to put her into an educational program. Yes, put you in an educational program, pretty girl. And so he contacted me. He's taken very good care of her, even though she has a disability or difficulty, and asked if it would be possible if we could use her as one of our wildlife ambassadors. And as you can see, she's absolutely beautiful and actually doing very, very well. She's done her first show last week in the public eye, and she handled the program really well. So she's coming along, and now, again, never be able to soar and fly and dive at 200 miles an hour, all the falcon stuff. But on the other hand, in captivity, she will never go hungry. She'll never know hunger. She'll never know cold. She'll never have to sit out in a snowstorm in sub-zero temperatures. She will never have to worry about other predators, wanting to kill and eat her. So she will have a very safe, a very comfortable life here with us as a wildlife ambassador. And so we've had a little Name the Falcon contest, and we have chosen a name for her. And the name that we have chosen is Helen. Now, we've had great names. We had about 150 names altogether suggested for her, and just was really difficult, and we had to really consider carefully as to what we were going to name her. And so thank you everybody who sent in a name for her. But the reason we chose Helen is I have 3 reasons. First and foremost, certainly a childhood heroine of mine that, I read the story when I was a kid about Helen Keller, a young lady born blind, born deaf, and she took her difficulties, like I said, I don't like the word disability, she took her difficulties and she was able to go past those difficulties and become literally a role model and a teacher for every one of us. To never ever underestimate anybody's, because we all, even though we have different weaknesses, but we also have very, very different strengths. And so she became an amazing role model and teacher, just like little Helen here is going to be a wonderful, wonderful wildlife ambassador to educate people about the wildlife and about the peregrine falcon. And so her life is going to be very, very rich as a teacher, educating the public. And so that's one of the reasons we named her Helen. The second reason we named her Helen is because of my grandmother was named Helen. Now, my grandmother, for those of you who have read my book, will remember that my grandmother literally saved my life. I have my own personal difficulty. I'm severely dyslexic, and when I was a child, it was commonly believed that I would never learn to read, never learn to write, and that I would have absolutely no potential for success in my life. And of course, that's completely not true. And in today's world, we know what being dyslexic is, and we know it's nothing more than the brain function or processes information differently. And so now we have children who are dyslexic, but we can give them the education that they need. But back in the 50s, we didn't have that. And so my grandmother, one day, whoop, we'll get it cleaned up in a minute. You pooped on the carpet, kiddo. My grandmother, who was a retired school teacher, one day she saw my report card, and it was all D's and F's because I was a really, really terrible student, being dyslexic. And my grandmother drugged me in the house and sat me down and asked what this is, and I says, well, that's my report card. And my grandmother says, no, what are these grades? And I says, well, everybody says I'm dumb, and this is the best I can do. And my grandmother, and you have to understand, this little tiny Iowa farm girl, basically looked at me with such anger. And my grandmother looked me in the eye and says, I know you. And I know you're every bit as smart as your brother and sister, maybe even more so. And every day after school, you're coming to my house. And every day after school, I had to go to Grandma's house. And every day after school, we had to do reading and writing and flashcards and math. And my grandmother taught me how to read. And she taught me how to write. And my grandmother would take me to the library. We could check out books on animals. And because of my grandmother, that's where my love for birds started out. And so if you haven't had a chance to ever read my book, you can go to the website. My book is called Healer of Angels. And if you ever want a wonderful book on wildlife rescue stories and the wisdom of grandparents, I know, Helen, you're such a good girl. That's a very, very fun read. So, Helen Keller, my grandmother Helen, and I have one more Helen in my life that's so very, very important to me, and that is I have the sweetest and most beautiful, wonderful granddaughter named Helen. And she was named after her grandmother, her great-grandmother, my grandmother, Helen. And so I have basically 3 reasons to call her Helen. I think that would be very, very, very appropriate. And so that's going to be her name. Her name is going to be Helen. And so, Wildlife Ambassador Helen. Now, for everyone that wrote in and suggested the name Helen, I do a lot of wildlife photography, and I'm going to take a nice portrait of her, and then I do my own photography, I do my own processing, and for everyone that named Helen, if you sent me a mailing address, then I will send you a photograph of Helen here, a nice 8.5 by 11 portrait of her as a thank you. And please, everyone, thank you for everything that you've done for us. You guys have been absolutely wonderful this year. Every one of you made a huge difference with the Wildlife Foundation. All of the gifts, all of the food for the animals, all of the donations, you guys have been amazing. So, our new falcon, her name is going to be Helen. And we're very, very excited. And continue watching videos, and you'll get to see her as she develops and as she continues to become a wildlife ambassador for us. Are you ready to go to your perch, sweetie? Are you ready? Ready to go to your perch, pretty girl? And right now, because Helen's our newest one, she needs lots of attention to help get her acclimated to everything. And so Helen gets to come upstairs and live in the living room with us. And so we bring her. And this is where she spends the night. There's my pretty girl. There you go. There's my pretty Helen. Oh, there you go, sweetie. There's my pretty girl. Yes, you are. Is that better? So she gets to hang out with the family and watch TV and put up with the silly dog and get used to lots of activities, because she will be doing a lot of programs in auditoriums with 500 screaming kids. And so she's got a really interesting life ahead of her, and I think she's going to be a very, very good wildlife ambassador for us. So everyone, here's Helen.